During a quiet beach escape, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock stumble upon a gravely ill stray dog lying alone in the sand. As they rush to get it help, Sandra's tears reveal how deeply this fragile life has touched them both. What begins as a simple walk becomes a powerful lesson in compassion, hope, and saying goodbye. I don't know why that morning felt quieter than it should have. The ocean was doing its usual work, pulling in, pushing out, but something in the air had the heaviness of a day that wouldn't let you stay a stranger to it. Keanu Reeves walked with his sleeves rolled up, shoes in one hand, letting the wet sand cool the soles of his feet. Sandra Bullock stayed close enough that their shadows kept crossing, the way they used to when they were younger and didn't know how to stop laughing at nothing. They hadn't planned to meet here. It just happened. An accidental overlap of schedules, a mutual friend's house nearby, a "do you want to take a walk?" text that felt easy to send and even easier to accept. They talked like people who had history but didn't want to make it heavy. Sandra teased him about how he still walked like he was trying not to wake someone up. Keanu laughed, then made a dramatic show of stomping in the shallow water until it splashed her calves. She gasped and chased him, and for a moment the beach heard them like it hears children, bright, unguarded, alive. Then the wind shifted. Sandra stopped first, not because she saw something, but because she felt it, an odd stillness, like the birds had agreed to go quiet. Keanu followed her gaze toward a stretch of sand where the tide had recently retreated. At first it looked like a pile of driftwood tangled with seaweed, the kind of debris the ocean returns without apology. But the driftwood moved. A dog lay half-curled near the waterline, ribs showing through a coat the color of sun-bleached honey. One ear was pinned awkwardly, sand caked into the fur around its face. Its chest rose in small, hesitant lifts, as if each breath required negotiation. The dog didn't bark or flinch when they approached. It didn't even try to run. It only blinked once slowly, like it was trying to decide whether the world was safe enough to stay in. Sandra's hand went to her mouth without thinking. Her eyes filled so fast it shocked her, as if the tears had been waiting for a reason. "Oh my God," she whispered, and the words came out smaller than she intended. Keanu crouched down a few feet away, careful not to loom. His voice dropped into that calm tone people use when they're trying to keep someone else from panicking, sometimes an animal, sometimes themselves. "Hey, buddy, you're okay. We're not going to hurt you." He reached out slowly, palm down, letting the dog smell him if it wanted to. The dog's nose barely moved. Sandra looked around for anyone, lifeguards, families, anybody. The beach behind them had people, but far enough away that it felt like another world. She waved once, twice, but no one noticed. She turned back, kneeling in the sand, her knees sinking as if the beach itself wanted to pull her closer to the dog. "I can't," she started, but her voice broke. She swallowed hard and tried again. "I can't leave it like this." Keanu's eyes stayed on the dog, but his attention split the way it does in a crisis. One part observing, one part planning. "We need water, not ocean water, fresh." He scanned the area and spotted a small beach cafe in the distance. "I'll run." Sandra grabbed his wrist before he could stand, not tight, just enough to anchor him. "Wait," she said. "If you go, what if it thinks we abandoned it?" He paused, and in that pause you could see something honest cross his face, an old, private sadness he didn't talk about. Then he nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. "Okay," he said quietly, "then we do this together." They both took off their light jackets. Keanu spread his on the sand like a barrier from the wind, while Sandra kept her hand near the dog's shoulder without touching it first, giving it space to choose contact. When the dog's head trembled, Sandra finally laid her fingers gently into the fur. It was warm, too warm, fever warm. The dog flinched at the touch, not with aggression, but with the reflex of something that had learned pain can come after kindness. Sandra's eyes squeezed shut and one tear slipped free anyway, landing on the dog's fur. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't pretend she wasn't crying. She just leaned in and whispered, "I'm here. You don't have to do this alone." Keanu pulled out his phone and began calling numbers, animal control, local vets, emergency lines, switching between speaker and silent like he was trying to keep the dog from being startled by sudden sound. Most went to voicemail. One rang and rang. The ocean kept moving, indifferent. And then Sandra noticed something that made her stomach tighten. A thin piece of red nylon, like part of a collar or leash, was looped around the dog's leg, pulled so tight it had worn the fur away. It wasn't just sick. It had been trapped, maybe for days, maybe longer. The dog tried to shift, but a sharp tremor ran through its body, and it whimpered so softly Sandra almost didn't hear it. "Keanu," she said, her voice suddenly urgent. "It's tied, look at its leg." He leaned closer, jaw setting. The kind of focus that arrives when gentleness has to become action. He reached into his pocket and found a small keychain tool, one of those simple gadgets people carry without expecting to need. He opened the tiny blade, but his hand stayed careful, steady. If he cut wrong, he'd slice skin. If he waited too long, the swelling could get worse. Sandra kept stroking the dog's neck in slow circles, trying to be a heartbeat it could trust. "Easy," she murmured. "Just breathe, just stay with us." Keanu slid the blade under the nylon, testing the tension, and the dog's eyes locked onto his. For the first time, there was alertness there. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of something else, something that looked like a question. "Do you mean it?" Keanu met that gaze like it mattered, like the dog was a person making a last decision. "I do," he said under his breath, more promise than sentence. He began to cut. The nylon didn't give easily. It was knotted and embedded with sand, and the dog jerked from the sting. Sandra's tears came harder now, not loud or dramatic, but helpless and furious. At whoever left the dog here, at how close the tide was creeping back in, at how unfair it is that love sometimes arrives late. Then from somewhere behind them, a sharp whistle sliced through the air. Keanu looked up and his face changed. Because a man was walking fast down the beach toward them, eyes fixed on the dog, and he wasn't coming with concern. He was coming with ownership, and in his hand, swinging like he'd carried it before, was the other end of a leash. Sandra's breath caught as the man called out, loud enough for people to turn and stare. "Hey, step away from my dog." Keanu's knife paused mid-cut, the nylon half-sliced, the dog trembling between pain and hope. And Sandra realized, with a cold drop in her chest, that saving the dog might not just mean getting it to a vet. It might mean standing between it and the person who put it here. The man's footsteps were heavy, angry enough that the sand seemed to resist him. He was sunburned, broad-shouldered, and wearing a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he got close, he pointed at the dog like it was property someone had scratched. "Back off," he repeated louder this time. "That's my dog." Sandra didn't stand up right away. She stayed low beside the animal, one hand still resting gently along its neck. She could feel the dog's whole body vibrating under her touch. It wasn't fear the way a playful dog fears thunder. This was the fear of recognition. The dog had seen this man before, and it did not expect mercy. Keanu rose slowly, keeping his posture open, palms visible. He didn't move like a hero. He moved like a person trying to keep a situation from turning ugly. "Your dog is in bad shape," he said, voice calm, controlled. "We're getting help." The man's eyes flicked to the red nylon around the dog's leg, half cut. His expression hardened in an instant. "Don't touch that," he snapped, stepping forward. Sandra's stomach twisted. That reaction wasn't worry. It was panic, like someone caught mid-act. She looked up at him, her voice steady despite the tears still clinging to her lashes. "If it's your dog, why is it tied up like this? Why is it lying here like it's been left to die?" For a second, the man's confidence faltered, then came back as aggression. He scanned the beach, noticing more heads turning their way. He lowered his voice, but it carried. "Mind your business. Dogs run off. You don't know what happened." Keanu glanced past the man and saw two teenagers filming from a distance, phones raised. A couple walking their own dog had slowed down too, wary but watching. The man noticed the attention and shifted tactics, smoothing his voice into something rehearsed. "Look, I appreciate you finding him. I'll take it from here." He reached for the leash in his hand, like the next step was simply to clip it on and drag the animal away. The dog let out a thin, broken sound, half whine, half plea, and tried to crawl backward, only to yelp from the tight nylon. Sandra's hand tightened into the fur. She didn't think about cameras or names or who might recognize them. She thought about the way living things give up when they realize no one is coming. "Not today." "No," she said, surprising even herself with the firmness. "You're not taking him anywhere until a vet sees him." The man's eyes flashed. "Lady, move." Keanu stepped slightly to the side, between the man and Sandra, not in a threatening way, just in a blocking way. "We've called for help," he said. "Let's wait." For a moment, it felt like the beach held its breath. The man looked at Keanu, then at Sandra, then at the phones pointed at him. His jaw worked as if chewing down fury. And then he did something small but telling. He took a step back and laughed, like the whole scene was ridiculous. "You people," he muttered, "always trying to be heroes." He turned his head and called out toward the lifeguard tower farther down the beach. "Hey, these folks are stealing my dog." The accusation landed like a slap. A few bystanders shifted uncomfortably. Some stopped filming. One woman frowned at Sandra like she was unsure who to believe. Sandra felt her chest tighten with that old familiar dread. How quickly a kind act can be twisted into a story you don't control. She looked down at the dog again, and it blinked up at her, exhausted, trusting her anyway. Trusting her with what little it had left. Keanu leaned close to Sandra without taking his eyes off the man. "We need proof," he murmured, "or we need the right person here fast." Sandra's mind raced. Proof. The red nylon cutting into skin. The dog's terror. None of it would look like a signed confession. She pulled her phone out with shaky fingers and began recording, focusing on the leg, the knots, the swelling, the sand rubbed into raw skin. "Say your name," she said quietly to the man, keeping her camera low but steady. He jerked his gaze to the phone. "Stop filming me." "Then stop lying," Sandra shot back, her voice trembling with anger now, not fear. The lifeguard started jogging toward them, drawn by the raised voices. The man's face tightened, and Sandra saw calculation there, like he was deciding whether public attention protected him or trapped him. As the lifeguard approached, the dog suddenly convulsed, one violent shudder that made its head drop hard onto the sand. Sandra's breath left her. She pressed her ear closer, listening for breath, feeling the warmth fading into something frighteningly still. "Keanu," she whispered, voice cracking. "I don't think he's okay. I don't think he's..." Keanu knelt instantly, fingers searching gently along the dog's chest for movement. The dog's eyes fluttered, unfocused. A weak exhale came, then nothing for a terrifying beat. And the man, watching the dog falter, said something under his breath that Sandra will never forget. "Good, saves me the trouble." Sandra's head snapped up. The lifeguard was close enough now to hear. Keanu froze, not from indecision, but from the kind of shock that turns into certainty. Because now it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was cruelty, spoken out loud. And the dog's next breath didn't come. Sandra didn't scream. She couldn't. The sound got stuck behind her ribs, heavy and useless. Her hands moved on instinct, hovering near the dog's chest like she could will air back into it. Keanu reacted first. He shifted the dog onto its side with practiced care, gentle but quick, and pressed his ear close to the muzzle. Nothing. He looked at Sandra, and there was no movie star calm in his eyes, only human urgency. "Call 911, he said. "Now." Sandra's fingers fumbled her phone, tears blurring the screen. She dialed while Keanu began compressions. 2 hands, steady rhythm, not theatrical, not dramatic, just relentless, like he refused to accept the ending the world was offering. The lifeguard reached them, breathless, taking in the scene. The collapsing dog, Keanu working, Sandra on the phone, the man standing just beyond with the leash dangling. What happened? "He was tied," Sandra said, voice breaking. "He's been like this. He needs help, please." The lifeguard's face tightened, eyes scanning the nylon, the raw skin, the man's posture. "Sir," he said, turning to the man, "is this your dog?" The man lifted his chin. "Yeah, and they're interfering. I was handling it." Keanu didn't look up from the compressions. "Handling it?" he said, each word clipped by effort. "He was dying in the sand." The man's confidence wavered under the lifeguard's stare. He took a step back like he wanted distance from the scene now, like death made him look bad. "Dogs get sick," he muttered. "It's not a crime." Sandra heard herself speaking with a clarity that surprised her, the way people do when they finally stop trying to be polite. You said good saves me the trouble. You said it. The lifeguard's eyebrows lifted. You said that. The man's eyes darted to the teenagers filming, to the couple watching, to the cafe in the distance. The beach had turned into a courtroom with no walls. She's twisting my words, he snapped. These celebrities are making a scene. Keanu's hands didn't stop. His shoulders strained, sweat forming along his hairline. He didn't even spare the man a glance. But his voice, when it came, was low and deadly honest. This isn't about us. Sandra, still on the phone, gave their location in broken phrases. She tried to stay calm, but each second felt like a theft. She watched the dog's chest, begging for movement. A bystander, a middle-aged woman with a towel draped over her arm, stepped forward. I saw him earlier, she said, pointing toward the man. He was dragging that dog near the parking lot. The dog kept falling. Another voice joined, a young guy with a surfboard tucked under his arm. Yeah, I saw it too. He yanked the leash like it was nothing. The man's face changed again, anger returning, sharp and unsafe. Shut up, he barked. Mind your own. Sir, the lifeguard cut in firm now, stepping closer. I need you to stay right here. For the first time, Sandra saw the man's body angle away, an escape line drawn in his posture. His hand tightened around the leash. Then the dog coughed. It was small, wet, almost silent, but it was sound, life scraping its way back. Keanu froze for half a heartbeat, then leaned in close, listening, watching the muzzle tremble. Come on, Keanu whispered. Stay with us. Sandra's knees went weak with relief, so sudden it felt like pain. She pressed her hand to the dog's shoulder and felt a faint flutter, breath returning like a candle refusing to go out. But the man saw it too, and instead of relief, something like irritation crossed his face, as if survival complicated his plan. Sirens began to wail in the distance, faint at first, then growing closer. The lifeguard held his stance, ready for the man to bolt. Bystanders hovered, no longer unsure, forming an invisible line of witnesses. Sandra thought they had made it, thought help was finally winning. Then the man lunged. Not at Keanu, not at Sandra. At the dog. His hand shot forward, grabbing toward the collar area as if to yank the animal up and drag it away before the authorities arrived. The dog's body jerked, a fresh yelp slicing through the air. Keanu moved like a switch had flipped. He caught the man's wrist, not violently but decisively, and twisted just enough to stop him. The leash dropped into the sand. Don't, Keanu said, voice calm in a way that was almost frightening. Not again. The lifeguard grabbed the man's other arm. That's it, he said. You're done. The man struggled, spitting curses, eyes wild. Let go of me, that's my dog. Sandra pulled the dog closer with her body, shielding it with her own arms like it was a child. Her tears fell onto its fur again, but this time they carried something new. Anger, yes, but also a fierce tenderness. The sirens were close now. An ambulance and a patrol vehicle rounded the far entrance to the beach access road, their lights flashing against the bright morning like reality finally arriving. But as the paramedics hurried toward them with a stretcher, the dog's head lifted weakly, and its eyes fixed on Sandra with a look so direct it made her heart stutter. Because in that look was recognition. Not of her face from a movie. Recognition like memory. Like this dog knew her. And that made no sense at all. The paramedics knelt immediately, moving with quick competence while keeping their voices soft. One checked the dog's gums, another slid a small oxygen mask over its muzzle. A portable monitor beeped faintly, a fragile metronome announcing that life was still present, still fighting. Sandra stayed close enough to feel useful but not in the way. She held the dog's paw between her hands, careful not to touch the injured leg. The paw was sandy, too light, the bones too noticeable. Still, it squeezed back, barely, but it did. Or maybe that was her imagination trying to survive the moment. Keanu gave the lifeguard a short statement, then turned to Sandra. You okay? He asked quietly. She shook her head, and it wasn't an answer, just truth. "I don't understand," she whispered. "He looked at me like he knew me." Keanu glanced at the dog, then at the man being held a few steps away, now trying to talk his way out. The police officer who'd arrived was listening, but his face was already skeptical, eyes flicking toward the nylon and the red marks around the dog's leg. The bystanders' phones were still raised. The story was recording itself. The paramedic lifted the dog gently onto the stretcher. The dog's body trembled with the movement, and Sandra instinctively moved with it, as if her presence could make the ride less terrifying. "You can come," the paramedic said, "but you'll have to sit up front unless we need extra hands." Sandra didn't even look at Keanu before answering, "I'm coming." Keanu nodded as if he'd expected it. "I'll follow." As they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance, the dog's head turned, weak but determined, searching for Sandra's face. When their eyes met again, something tightened in Sandra's chest. An old ache, a memory that didn't have a clear picture, only a feeling. The doors closed. The siren didn't wail this time, just a steady urgency as they pulled away. Keanu followed in a borrowed car from the cafe. An older couple insisted, pressing keys into his hand like he was a neighbor, not a celebrity. He accepted with a humble nod and promised he'd return it, and Sandra thought, this is what people never see. The quiet ways goodness moves when it's not being filmed. At the clinic, everything was bright lights and clean floors and clipped voices. A vet tech hurried them into an exam room. The dog was taken behind swinging doors, and Sandra was left staring at a poster about heartworm prevention while her own heart felt like it was being wrung out. Keanu sat beside her, elbows on knees, hands clasped. He didn't try to distract her with jokes now. He just stayed, the way a steady person stays when someone else is falling apart. Minutes stretched. Then a veterinarian finally came in, mask lowered, eyes tired but kind. "The dog is severely dehydrated, malnourished, and there's tissue damage on the leg from prolonged constriction," she said. "We're stabilizing him. He's lucky you found him when you did." Sandra let out a breath that sounded like a sob trying to become a prayer. "Will he live?" The vet hesitated, just long enough for fear to surge. "We think so," she said carefully. "But there's something else. His microchip, if the registry is up to date, lists an owner's name." Sandra braced herself, expecting the man's name, expecting confirmation of what they already knew. The vet looked down at her clipboard, then up at Sandra, confused. "It's registered to a woman named Sandra." The room tilted. Keanu's head lifted sharply. Sandra blinked, sure she'd misheard. No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The vet turned the clipboard slightly so she could see. There it was in plain text. A registration record with her first name and last initial, an old phone number she hadn't used in years, and an address that belonged to a house she'd sold long ago. Keanu's voice was careful, as if one wrong word might break her. "Sandra, did you ever have a dog you lost?" Sandra's mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Then she said, almost to herself, "I had a puppy, years ago, before everything got so busy, before I learned how easy it is to postpone love." The memory hit her like a wave. A small golden pup with oversized paws, a clumsy tail, and a habit of sleeping against her feet as if guarding her from loneliness. She remembered a stormy night, a gate left unlatched, a frantic search with a flashlight, her voice hoarse, calling a name into the dark. "I never found him," she whispered. I thought he was gone." Keanu stared at the clipboard, then back at Sandra, the pieces connecting in his eyes. "What was his name?" Sandra's throat tightened, saying it felt like opening a door she'd nailed shut for self-protection. "Sonny," she said. "His name was Sonny." Behind the exam room door, a faint bark cracked through the clinical silence. Weak, raspy, but unmistakably real. The vet's eyes widened. "He's responding to voices," she said. "Can you come with me, carefully?" Sandra stood too fast, dizzy with hope and grief colliding. Keanu rose with her, steadying her elbow. As they walked down the hall, Sandra's mind raced with questions that didn't have room to breathe. If this was her dog, how did he end up on that beach, tied and near death? And why, after all these years, did he show up again, now? They reached the treatment area. The vet pushed the door open, and Sandra saw the dog lift his head, eyes searching, finding her, and his tail, even with all the pain in his body, thumped once against the blanket. Not a stranger's tail. A homecoming. Sandra's knees buckled, and she covered her mouth with both hands as a sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob, because joy and heartbreak were suddenly the same thing. But then the vet added softly, "There's another note on the file. A recent transfer request was submitted. Someone tried to change ownership last week." Sandra's tears stopped mid-fall. Keanu's face hardened. "To who?" The vet looked down again, then up, uneasy. "The name on the transfer form matches the man from the beach." Sandra felt the room go cold, because it meant this wasn't random cruelty. Someone had found Sonny, and instead of returning him, they tried to erase her.